Every single piece of loot in Arc Raiders follows some relative spawn logic, whether you're talking about all items you'll find in a general sense, or you're looking for something in particular, like a specific blueprint, specific attachments. All of it follows general rules for how and where it can spawn. Up until this point, the codes have been kind of cracked for the most part, especially when it comes to like blueprints. That's been something that people have documented and have tested extensively since October in the game's launch. One thing that I've personally not seen with respect to its spawn logic though, are legendary and higher tier items that do not have a blueprint currently. Things like your kinetic converters, anvil splitters, silencer 3s, horizontal grips. Do they follow any specific rules? Are there specific conditions or locations you can find them in, generally speaking, that maybe you can even farm them? Well, I set out with the last week and a half or so on about 20 hours on and off stream of testing specific loot locations and loot pools, hypothesis after hypothesis, to refine what we know and hopefully grant a better, more solid picture on how to obtain these items. While I think that we can still refine even further, the findings are beneficial enough that I wanted to share them with you today and what we've found thus far. 25 plus successful legendary or loot specific epic attachment runs using the information we'll talk about in this video, to the point that I was chaining together one every raid by the end. Drop your thoughts as we go along, drop a like if you enjoy the video, and make sure to subscribe for more Arc Raiders and other FPS content. I'd love to have you in the community, and hey, if you'd like to join in on this testing and other stuff live as it happens, perhaps pushing the conversation to where we go in videos together, make sure you stop by the streams roughly every other day here on the channel and over on Twitch. But anyways, let's get into it. So first, let me run you through my initial methodology. The first hypothesis that I had was a sort of funnel effect for the spawn logic. What I mean by this is that your base raids and maps, attachments have historically favored residential style containers. I say historically because there's a strange like curveball recently, which we'll touch on in a second when we get to the tier 2 attachments and things, but residential containers being things like drawers, cabinets, fridges, armoire drawers, suitcases, and the likes. Things that could spawn the general attachment or the blueprint even for basic level attachments, your green uncommon items. They'd be found in those base level raids. So Dam, Buried City, Spaceport, Blue Gate, Stella, but no map modifiers or conditions. The next tier above that, or I guess below in the funnel comparison, would be major map modifiers like Locked Gate, Hidden Bunker, Hurricane, and Cold Snap were the best choices for your blue or rare and epic level attachments like your Extended Mag 3, Extended Barrel, Lightweight Stock, and so on and so forth as of the Shrouded Sky update. Electromagnetic Storm and Night Raids also came in handy with spawns of those, but I felt like, again, after about 20 to 30 hours of testing and just regaining all my blueprints post-expedition, that the initial aforementioned just had slightly better spawn rates. Now, coming back to that historical mention that we just made, I say historically because since the Flashpoint update, I've noticed that a few oddities have kind of come in with the loot drops in those major map modifiers. Notably, I'm finding standard blueprints like the Extended Mag 2 blueprints or something like that in those major modifier conditions, whereas previously they weren't in there at all after looting thousands of containers probably. But either way, access to those higher tier items were there as of those major map modifiers. So in theory, in my mind, the funnel system would produce this hypothesis. Your highest level attachments would follow the same spawn logic, major map modifiers plus looting residential containers, plus perhaps locked key rooms or breach rooms that would then be designated as those higher tier areas to pinpoint it even further, taking a higher rarity spawn rate and designating it to hot zones per se, but making sure that you check all those boxes and getting a more precise and harder to come by idea. Well, for a little while, that actually panned out perfectly. Like, that thought process was confirmation bias after a few runs that it just worked out. But then, well, it didn't. The big detail that derailed this was the condition requirement. That theory of the funnel kind of fell apart because while it was going well, I also queued into some standard raids and I found things like a kinetic converter in Buried City standard and an anvil splitter in Bird City. So with that, we kind of had to revise. Okay, maybe not funnel pinpointing into a very specific high density loot area in a specific map condition, but what about those hot zones? Could we change focus and go there? For this, it plays more into a static approach to loot, and in a sense, it does make more sense because while I've seen plenty of locations that people have reported seeing these items out there on the internet, like one-offs here and there are a lot of that. It's not a lot of recreation here that you end up seeing with some of these places reported. But as of our testing, we've found on 2 maps, 3 locations on each of these maps that will very reliably give you a legendary or higher tier epic item when looting. I think the probably most notable one is Buried City. Buried City kind of seems to be, when it comes to some loot, the sort of golden child of all the maps, that it's just the best for all of it, and it's definitely the best I've found so far for all of these items. The Plaza Rosa Pharmacy, Arbusto Pharmacy, and A2 Apartment Building, as strange as this is, all end up having very reliable drop rates of these legendary and higher tier items that, again, are epic but may not have blueprints associated with them. Spaceport, the container storage building, the breach room that's across from the key room, I found to be more reliable. Vehicle maintenance, that upper story breach room, while it doesn't have a lot of containers, it can produce that chance of a legendary item. And then control tower, personally speaking, I have not seen this myself. My keys for control tower were very few and far in between, so I got unlucky every single time that I tried to test this, but I have seen plenty of footage out there of other people reliably getting this in there. So when you take a look at that, it seems like these areas are very easy to replicate and seem to be kind of static spawns. So the things you'd pull out of these include the snap hook, kinetic converter, anvil splitter, silencer 3, horizontal grip, photo cloak, lightweight stock, shotgun silencer, and wolf packs for night raids I found. So a lot of good things you can find here out of this, but okay, how can we refine that initial theory? What's the additional methodology here with this? One thing that I think we felt out here out of testing this for as long as we have the last week and a half on stream and off stream is that it very much so feels like these hot zones do exist, but they're on rotating spawns. So something in each raid will spawn, but not guaranteed at one of those, but will be at one of those, if that makes sense. Like if you go to Buried City, you go to Plaza Rosa Pharmacy, it's not guaranteed that you'll see something in that pharmacy exactly, but it could spawn in one of those rotations of either that pharmacy, the Arbusto Pharmacy, or the A2 Apartment Building. Similar to how kind of raider caches work, where there's clusters around each of the maps of raider caches, where if you look at like a utility map, you'll see that there's a bunch of spawns in a small given area, but usually only one of those will be there every single raid. So the amended theory is that you'll find them in one of these known spawn locations in each of the maps, but that you won't find a guaranteed one in the specific one you go to. My mind then jumped to the theory of, if it's rotating spawns, does that mean there could potentially only be one legendary item that will spawn per game? And while it is something that this might be tough to test because hitting all three of these, especially if we end up having a larger sort of rotation around the map to hit them, Buried City, even though it's a smaller map, it is something that takes a decent bit of time to hit all three, and chances are they will be hit by somebody else. But I did end up having one raid where I ended up getting an anvil splitter and a snap hook. So got to adjust that theory a little bit, but it may not be just one that spawns per match. So my overall assumption here with this, after again 20 plus hours of testing this and looting these to success a couple of dozen times, I think that especially when it comes to the other maps and their spawns, there's definitely still more to learn. But I think we're kind of close to cracking the code, or closer than we have before, especially since when we started this little venture for the first time. My educated guess at this point, these higher tier items don't necessarily follow the same spawn logic as other items we've seen in the past, being a combination of specific containers and location specific ones, rather than just those containers you'll see that can be spread throughout the entire map, making it a bit easier to replicate perhaps, but in a much more limited capacity than elsewhere in various maps. When it comes to the standard raid versus modifiers, I do think it matters, but also doesn't to a degree. And what I mean by that is that I think any modifier increases that chance, but you're still bound more so to some of those hot zones, and potentially swinging some of those results in favor of certain items. Like I found from my successes that night raids seem to favor snap hooks and horizontal grips. Hurricanes seem to favor kinetic converters, Bird City testing seemed to favor anvil splitters and silencer 3s, but they weren't necessarily only found in those conditions because I had found other things in standard Buried City raids. So take it with a grain of salt. I'll feel way more confident about these assessments when I have another 25 to 50 successful runs under my belt, but from a preliminary perspective, that's kind of how my raids slightly skewed. Again, still obviously work to do. I admittedly do not know if I've personally found any of these on Bluegate, Stella, Dam, because I've had no luck and there was no real universal like consensus on hot zones or where a lot of players have found these on other maps that I've seen when looking up just for some data points, but I'm sure there's some to be tested on those maps. I'm still just genuinely curious on all of this, like as a nerd trying to understand everything and the logic of the game and how it works. Even after this video goes live, I'm still going to be testing further, but if we find anything else or a more definitive method and route, happily we'll be updating you with another video. But of course, that's my findings here with this. There are additional ways to obtain these. Either they're one-offs or not necessarily the best drop rates, like the agave plant for Scrappy, feeding that can return some items. Projects, you can end up getting anvil splitters, you can end up getting kinetic converters, but they're not necessarily guaranteed. But let me know what you think. Have you guys found any of these? Seriously, I would love your help in sharing any points that you've found these items at so that we can test this even further and perhaps really crack the code. But I want to share this with you guys. Again, been testing this for the last week and a half or so. Been having a lot of fun doing this, but let me know your thoughts down below. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video, and make sure to subscribe for more Arc Raiders and other FPS coverage. I'd love to have you in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care, and peace.